There we are. We have started recording. I'm going to just go ahead and apologize in advance. I am based in the DC area on the East Coast in the Eastern time zone, and it's the evening for me at the end of a very long week, and my brain is a bit fried. So I'm going to go ahead and apologize now for any missteps that I make today or being slow. So go easy on me. So just a reminder of our workshops schedule. Last week we had the Makiki and Palolo sub-basin discussion, and I'll give you a couple highlights of that in a minute. Today, as I mentioned, is Manoa, and then next week we have the lower watershed, including the canal itself. And then for the fourth workshop, that will be determined by the discussions that we have prior to then. So we're gathering information and concerns that people have. And if there's anything that you want to actually discuss in that workshop, by all means, let us know. So you can do it in the chat, or you can send us an email, aloi@honolulu.gov, or you can use the contact form on the website, honolulu.gov/aloi. Okay, so some highlights from last week. One, I thought just in general, it was constructive. There was a lot of interest. People were really engaged. I thought the discussions were really good. Two, there were some questions that people still had about the project. So, for example, what is the design storm? Are we designing to the 20-year event or the 50-year event, and that kind of thing? As you know, the previous version of the study was sort of pegged to the 100-year or the 1% annual probability event. This time it's, we'll talk a little more about this in a bit, but we're going to whatever the optimal level is. So the analysis itself will reveal where is the best bang for our buck going to be. So we don't actually know yet exactly which, is it going to be the 50 years, is it going to be, whatever. But that will be revealed through the analysis itself. Another question people had was, where's the area that this project is intended to protect? Is this mainly about Waikiki, or is there another area? And in fact, this is to manage flood risk in the entire Aloi watershed. So it's all of the communities in the entire watershed. Everybody counts. There was a significant concern that we heard about debris management and stream maintenance in both of the breakout groups last week. So that is definitely noted. There was continued interest in the SWIFT tunnels, which, as we mentioned, we are continuing to analyze. There's some work that still needs to be done there. Storage areas that do not require pumps should be prioritized, was a preference that people expressed. Several additional measures were proposed, which we added to the management measure tracker, and I'll paste the link to that again here. There's the latest one. And we also had asked for additional information about Wilikalo, and we received some information, so thank you for that. So today's agenda, much like last week, so we're in the introduction now. We will have a brief presentation to give you updates on the analysis of measures in the Manoa sub-basin. Then I'll do a little setup for our breakout discussions, and those discussions will take up the bulk of today's session. We'll be taking notes during those discussions. We will not come back as a large group to do report outs or anything like that, but then we will do a wrap up at the end of that. And we have our usual suspects of hosts and discussants today. Eric and Cindy will be our presenters as last week. I'm Tyson Vaughn. I'm the lead facilitator. Kelly and Ben will also help to facilitate, and then we have Jeff as a discussant from the Corps, as well as Alex, Haku, and Matt from the city and county, as always. So for the presentation, please put your comments and questions in the chat or hold them until we have our breakouts. Keep your audio on mute. And as always, you can send me an email if you have any issues. And I think I'm going to turn it now over to Cindy.
All right. Aloha and good afternoon, everyone. So the slides that I'll be covering is really to help illustrate where we are at within this study process. So we held our initial round of public workshops back in November of last year, where you all helped us to identify the problems and opportunities within this watershed. And then since then, we've been updating our models. We had a technical site visit last month where the team gathered additional field data, which really feeds into those models. And then we've also developed a full list of management measures, which are being tracked in that management measure tracking spreadsheet, which we'll be discussing in further detail. So right now, where we are in this process, we're in that third arrow where we're beginning to develop alternative plans. So we have our full list of measures and we've started screening some of them. And so looking back at our public meetings this past November, this is really the area that we heard that the public really wants to have that opportunity to have additional input into. And so that's really what we're doing here today, is to make sure that we all have your input, your real-time concerns, feedback, and everything into this portion of our planning and development of the study. And so after we screened the measures, that's where we'll develop alternative plans and then start evaluating and comparing them. Next slide, please. And so the previous slide fits into this first two big blue arrows that you see here on this slide. So that's really covers the study process that we just talked about, the development and screening of management measures. And so this slide just provides a more detailed view of where that all fits within the overall study process, this overall study timeline. And so where we're at right now is where you see that double yellow arrow with the 4 sub-basin workshops. And we'll be talking about management measure development and screening at these workshops. And then the next round of meetings will be around the July timeframe, where we'll be discussing the array of alternatives that have been developed based off of the screening. And then we anticipate a draft report to be released in the November timeframe. I know it says September here, and we really need to fix that in this slide, but we anticipate having our draft report more or less complete by the September timeframe, but it really has to undergo a rigorous review process. And so we'll likely have the draft report ready to go on the street by the November timeframe. And so we'll still be holding our public meetings in that September to November timeframe just to discuss what will be presented in that draft report, so it's not a surprise to anyone. And then we have our final report set for March of 2023 so yet. Next slide, please. So this is again a snapshot of what our management measure tracker spreadsheet looks like. It's up on the project website at the link listed right there on the resources tab. And so last week we had a total of 204 measures listed in the spreadsheet. Then we heard a few additional measures proposed at this past meeting. So now we have a total of 208 measures being tracked. And so out of those 208 measures, about 48 of them have been screened out, and still another 160 are under consideration. And so because there are so many measures listed, these meetings just won't have enough time to be able to cover each and every one of them. And some of them are very similar in concept, so we're able to group some of those. And so that's really what we'll be covering, is the main ones that are listed in that tracker spreadsheet. And so the goal of the posting of the tracking spreadsheet is really to allow you to see in real time the progress that's being made, what's being screened, and allow you that opportunity to provide real-time feedback. So, you know, I would encourage you to continuously check the website for any updates. Look at the new management measures that were screened or passed through, and then just keep submitting your real-time ideas, feedback, comments to the project team. And so I think we'll end the meeting with where you can, or how you can contact the team continuously through our crowdsourced reporter as well as through our email. And so now I'll be turning it over to Eric, who will be going over the screening process.
Great, thanks Tyson and thanks Cindy. So as Cindy mentioned, we have a lot of measures that we need to ultimately take a look at and analyze and determine whether or not they're going to move forward into developing the final array. And that, in a nutshell, is the process of management measure screening. So taking a look at all these measures and determining their viability. So at this point in the study process, we've really engaged in two different iterations of the screening process. So the first iteration on the left, iteration 1, is complete at this point. And basically our screening criteria, the tools that we use to screen measures for the first iteration were, first off, our study authority. So, the question of, is the measure within, the authority of the study, or can we even look at it kind of under the process in the study that we have? The second is technical feasibility. So is it technically feasible? And it's important to note here that this isn't just some subjective determination by us of whether or not it's technically feasible. We're using existing data, existing conditions that we see on the ground, engineering standards and best practices to make the determination of whether or not something is technically feasible. And in this first iteration, it's at a very, very high level. So if there's any opportunity or consideration that it may be technically feasible, it was going to pass into iteration number 2, which is the iteration that we are currently in, and it's ongoing. So under iteration 2, our screening criteria get a little bit more refined, and we start thinking about how effective are each of these measures. And so when we talk about effectiveness, we're really thinking about, how much will it reduce life safety risk and economic damages. And if you think back, if you were involved in any of our other public meetings, those are really our study objectives. So we can quantify how well they meet our objectives. We can start thinking about efficiency, and when we talk about efficiency, we're really talking about, how cost effective is it? Basically, are we going to be able to reduce damages enough to justify how costly it is? And again, we can use existing data from previous iterations of the study and measures that were looked at there, as well as, engineering practices and data that we can gather from our engineering team. We're also considering environmental impacts or benefits of each of these measures. And so that's been a big driver and will continue to be a driver of the screening process as we move forward. And I mentioned that we're using existing data, and when I talk about that, we're really able to utilize the models and the tools developed under previous iterations of the study to look at things like water volume. So we can quantify how much water we would have to reduce or address in order to reduce risk in certain areas. And so that's a piece of data and a piece of information that we have that can help us determine effectiveness, say, in the criteria. We also have expected damages. So we have our economic models from previous iterations, and we can quantify expected damages under the range of flood events, right? Cindy talked about, the full range, and Tyson talked about kind of we're not constrained to that 100-year event anymore. So we can look at damages under the 5, the 10, the 25, the 50-year events, and then quantify those damages and see, how much a measure would cost and determine whether or not it's going to be cost effective. And so those are the tools that we have to analyze under the screening iteration. I also want to note that the team has been, and we will be presenting tonight, what we're calling a tiering system. And basically, the tiering is simply to prioritize analyses. And so as we go through iteration number 2, we're saying, is this a tier 1, a tier 2, or a tier 3 measure? And when we say that, we're not saying, do we believe these measures are going to be the most effective, or are these the measures that we as a team are going to identify as the most important? Really, it is how can we prioritize our analyses, understanding that we have 208 measures, right? We've got to prioritize analysis in such a way as to be most effective and efficient. And so, for example, we might be able to look at, if we're looking at storage, we can identify the area that has the greatest amount of storage in the basin and then determine whether or not we're going to be able to reduce water volumes enough to reduce risk in that certain area. And if the answer is no, then pretty much we can screen out smaller storage areas in the same watershed, right? So it's, again, not prioritizing based on importance, it's prioritizing based on, the overall analysis in terms of how that's going to proceed. And again, just want to make the note here and kind of reiterate that we're going to look at all of these, even though it might be a tier 3, say, that it's still going to be assessed. It just might be a little bit further down in terms of the timing of how they are assessed or when they are assessed. The next slide, please. So this slide is simply to reiterate the watershed, overall All-O-Y watershed, and today we're focusing on the Manoa Valley, which is kind of the heart, the center of the overall watershed. And so go ahead and next slide, Tyson. So I know a lot of what we've presented so far, for those of you that were on the last meeting, has been redundant. You know, we can't assume that everybody on the last call is in this call, so we want to make sure we present everything. And so this slide has some information that we also covered in the last slide. Just to note that we understand that natural and nature-based measures and non-structural measures are very important to the communities within the watershed in terms of how they're considered into this planning process. Things like forest invasive management and a decrease in overall imperviousness can reduce flood risk. And so the team has identified these as tier 1 measures, meaning that we have identified them as priorities for modeling. We have not necessarily gotten to those analyses yet, and so we haven't been able to screen them at this point. But we are going to be doing a series of sensitivity analyses to see how conversion of invasive species in the watershed to more native species that might improve infiltration and increase transpiration might result in decreased risk downstream. And the same with imperviousness. If we could reduce imperviousness by things like permeable pavers or measures like that, what can that do? So again, we've identified them as priorities, we just haven't gotten there. And so one specific example of a decrease in imperviousness within Manoa that we're looking at is permeable pavements at Manoa Marketplace. So that represents a pretty large area of impervious surface, and so we might be able to look at permeable pavements there and what that might do to the watershed. And so that's just a specific example of that larger measure that we'll be looking at in Manoa. We're also going to be considering non-structural measures, things like floodproofing of homes or businesses, elevation of homes or businesses. And so again, that is a priority. It's a tier 1 measure for us. We just haven't gotten there. We need our final H&H models, which are just being finalized this week actually, to be able to analyze those. Debris management, again, I know that we've talked a lot about how that's very important. And again, we have ways to look at that within the models. We just have not gotten there yet. The other one I'll mention and highlight here is the channel naturalization. So we know that the Manoa stream and basically all the streams, Palolo and Makiki, are channelized or they have concrete in them in certain portions of their length. And so we can look at kind of restoring that to a more natural stream and what that might do to flood risk. The only other thing I want to highlight on this slide is as we go through this, you're going to be seeing, so there's tier 1, there's tier 2, there's tier 3, and then there's under consideration. And under consideration just simply means that we haven't quite gotten to them yet in the second screening iteration. So go ahead, Tyson. So because of the data, the models that we have been able to get a little bit further into the screening of some structural measures. So because the previous iterations had more data and information on those, we've been able to take a little bit more look at those. So we're spending a lot of times on structural measures. Again, I don't want there to be the perception that structural measures are what we're focusing on per se. It's just that, again, at this point in the study process, it's what we've been able to focus on given the tools that we've had to this point. So if we kind of talk through this, each slide is going to have a table on the left that goes through specific measures, and the map on the right is just going to kind of show you where those are in the world. And so we'll start at the top with the Manoa Park Detention Basin. So the Manoa Valley District Park is the largest green circle and the largest green area on that map. And so it does represent the largest area for storage kind of within the heart of the watershed. One thing I do want to note here is a lot of the measures that we're going to be talking about and the team has been primarily focusing on to this point are utilizing existing open space and existing infrastructure. So if we can provide less of a footprint on the landscape, we see that as a win for everybody. And so we've identified the Manoa Park Detention Basin as a tier 1 measure, meaning that we're going to analyze it first. Because if you think about it, the more water we can store there, the less water we have to deal with downstream. And so it makes sense to look at it first, because if we can store a lot of water and we have to do less downstream after that, that's great. And so then we have a better understanding. And so the bridge just on the upstream end of the Manoa Valley District Park, we've also identified as a potential pinch point, meaning that it can back up and cause some inundation around. And so we're looking at modifying that bridge as well as part of kind of that overall area and the measures that we're looking at. One thing that was brought up during the last public meeting was what does it look like actually when we think about converting existing green space to a detention basin? And really, we're talking about leaving it as a green space, leaving it as a park. And so essentially, it would be a multi-purpose space where if there are playing fields, sports fields, those fields would still be there. You could potentially dig it down and maybe put a small berm that could be used as stadium seating, say, for viewing those sporting events. So there are ways to utilize those spaces as storage while maintaining their existing uses. So again, really not an increase in the footprint on the landscape or a loss to the community as a whole. It's just kind of making a new use where one already exists. So just downstream of that, again, is the Woodlawn Bridge area. And we know that, during these larger flood events, the stream kind of jumps its banks in that area and can flood out the Woodlawn area. And then also that water can go down into kind of the University of Hawaii campus and beyond. And so we are looking at a number of measures that we have identified as Tier 1 priorities in that area, including modifying the bridge. We could elevate the bridge, and therefore it would be less of a pinch point, maybe result in less debris buildup. There was a bypass. So in the map, the bypass is kind of the bottom green circle where there's a little orange line. That bypass is essentially a tunnel that can divert water from above the bridge downstream of the bridge. So we're going to look at that. You could also just put a big culvert around the bridge, not necessarily a bypass. It's kind of like a bypass. There's just a box culvert that's a little bit, it doesn't have the length, and it can shuttle water around the bridge. Increasing the capacity of the stream around the bridge above and below can reduce inundation because you have more storage area in the stream. We've also considered using the Innovation Center parking lot just next door to the bridge as potential underground storage. And so again, that's kind of an open space where we might be able to put storage underneath of the parking lot while maintaining its use of the parking lot. So again, trying to utilize existing space without having an additional footprint on the landscape. And then things like flood walls. We can also look at kind of modifying the bank in such a way as to prevent the water from jumping its banks. So those all represent measures that we're looking at in that area. And again, many of those are identified as Tier 1, meaning that we're gonna prioritize those for analysis, and the team is already starting to look at what those conceptual designs may be. And so again, as Cindy mentioned, this screening process is iterative, and so as we move through this process over the next month, we will be screening things out. So it'll be very important for everybody to continue checking back to the spreadsheet. Next slide, please. So I just have some photos here of the Manoa Valley District Park in the top left, the bridge just at the top of that park and the bottom left, and then the Woodlawn Bridge at the top right. So our team was out there a couple of weeks ago seeing these areas, assessing potential viability of some of these measures, starting to envision what they could look like on the ground. And so just wanted to show some pretty pictures so you didn't hear me talk and see figures the whole time. Next slide, please. So if we move a little bit further downstream, the team took a look at the Manoa Detention Basin. So the Manoa Community Park was looked at in previous iterations of the study. And again, it represents a very large green space within the watershed that we could convert to a multi-purpose detention basin, again, while maintaining its current use as a park without impacting that. The team also, so that represents a Tier 1 measure, meaning the team is focusing on designing, looking at conceptual designs right now so that we can model it and screen it out or not, or move it forward. The team also looked at the University of Hawaii practice field. So again, that's kind of to the left there in the orange circle. That is a Tier 3 measure. So it does represent a large green space, and there are ways that we can get water from the stream to there. It's pretty involved. It might involve tunneling through the kind of the hillside that goes right underneath those dormitories at the University of Hawaii, and then berming the practice field up so that you can store water there. And so again, it does represent, it's technically viable, but it is technically challenging. And so again, we're going to focus on seeing how much we can store in other areas first, and then see if we need additional storage in that. So it's a little bit further down on the tiered modeling list. If we can store enough water in other areas, then we might not necessarily need it, although it still will be assessed. The other storage area I'm showing here in the red circle, it's a large ridge there right along the Manoa Stream. The team had looked at maybe being able to tunnel under there and use that as underground storage. After being there, the team realized the technical challenges and costs associated with that were going to be too great, and so we've screened that measure out at this point. And so a few others, flood walls towards the mouth just above upstream of the confluence of the Manoa and the Pololo streams. Again, those have been looked at in previous iterations of the report, and we'll still consider those as well as somebody had, the idea of using the Manoa detention facility and then having a bypass channel, tunneling water from there either out to the golf course or to the ocean or directly to the canal. And so again, that's under consideration as well. So again, next slide. And so I think this is my final measure slide that we'll talk about today for structural measures. there was a lot of discussion in the last meeting about the SWIFT tunnel proposal that had been brought up in previous iterations of this effort, well, associated with previous iterations of this effort. And so the team is absolutely considering that and considering other aspects to that. So, additional costs associated with real estate acquisitions that may have not been necessarily incorporated into the initial round. But the team is actively looking at those tunnels. And so it has been identified as a tier 3 measure, again, because if we can store water elsewhere and address water in other ways, it might reduce kind of the size or extent of the tunnels that are needed. And so, again, trying to kind of just, figure out how to best and most effectively and efficiently analyze these. Some other measures that, we don't necessarily have specific locations for at this point. They're still under consideration, or are installing things like baffles or check dams in the stream, just structures in the stream to slow water down. That can help with timing as water gets down to the canal. And so that can also reduce risk throughout the watershed, as well as, dredging and modifying the stream channel. So increasing the capacity either through dredging or maybe expanding the size of the stream channel, maybe do some benching, things like that, just to increase capacity overall. And again, right now, there's no specific areas for those. It's just, we're going to assess those as we can get to them moving forward. And so with that, I think I hopefully talked less fast, or slower, I guess is the correct term, than I did last time, and I'll pass it back to you, Tyson.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, that was good. I appreciate it. All right, folks. So we're going to move to our discussion groups. And as last time, Ben is going to help us by facilitating the main room, which is where we're all situated right now. That is going to be, those of you who are on the phone only will stay in the main room, because WebEx can't handle folks on phone only for breakout sessions. So you'll stay here. And usually there are a few people who end up in the main room for whatever reason. But today, because we don't have different areas being discussed, we're all discussing the same area. So I'm going to just randomly assign everybody to a group. But here's the facilitators we have for each group. Myself and Kelly will be in group 1, and Eric and Cindy will be in group 2. And then we'll have, our discussants will be floating around, and they'll be able to possibly help answer some questions as well. So some questions to consider as we head into the breakout discussions. What questions do you have about our process? What questions do you have about any of the measures that Eric talked about today, or about other measures that we have not talked about today? And do you think that we've captured the measures appropriately so far, and are we missing any other measures? For our ground rules, as usual, if you have a question or a comment, you click the raise hand tool there on the bottom or next to your name in the participant list, or you can put it in the chat. Keep your audio on mute unless you're talking. First time you talk, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great. Be conscious of acronyms and technical language as usual. And also please be mindful that others will also have a chance to speak. So with that, I am going to assign you to the breakout sessions. Let's see, here we go. Assign automatically. Bingo. So we should be sorting here any second. There we go. Takes WebEx a little time. And those of us who are co-hosts, we will have to, join manually. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and join group 1. Kelly, you can join me, and see you all back here in a bit.
Ben, you're on double mute, brother.
Thank you for that. Hey, greetings. My name's Ben Rader. I was on double mute and I was blabbing away, but here to introduce you to this is what we call the main room. Folks on the telephone and perhaps on the telephone app cannot get to the breakout sessions, I believe. So it's a small group. We got 3 people, maybe a few more. And if you're just joining now, you always have the option to join a breakout session. You should look for in your participant panel there's options to join breakout rooms, and I could potentially help you if you want to get to a breakout room. But if we can, for those on the phone, can you please just introduce yourself so we can put names to phone numbers, not necessarily wanting to call you because I don't see your full phone number, but I'd love to get some human interactions. And anybody else, actually, I see Scott is in our room, Mindy. I know Minerva from the Army Corps, but the phone numbers, yep, unidentified. If folks want to just come on, say hello. We're a small group, so it'd be great to meet you all in person. And perhaps double mute has got you as well, which is a real possibility. You should be able to hit *6 on your phone, and that would unmute you. We can also leverage the chat if people are having a hard time getting off of mute. I'd love to hear first your name, but and who you are, but also the purpose of this meeting is really to dive into the questions posted here and talk about the measures. Let us know here. Not all of us can see them actually because we're on the phone. So what questions do you have about the screening process? What questions do you have about specific measures described today? What questions do you have about other measures not mentioned? And let's let that guide the discussion. So would anybody like to kick off the discussion, either come off of mute or in the chat box? Okay. And if I don't get interaction, I will just take it as a note that we're having technical difficulties or folks don't want to participate, and that is not a bad thing. But I will probably just take a pause until I get some signal of interaction. And again, I'm here to help you if you want to get to a breakout room where others are sharing their thoughts. Happy to help you get there as well. Mindy, 808 number, if you want to come off of mute. Beautiful. If not, I may jump into a breakout session just to see how it's going and I can come back. But I would love to work with you. But it's got to be a two-way street here. Okay, I will be back. I'll check back in minutes. Don't want to leave you hanging, but I'm not getting any interaction one way or the other. So jump into a breakout room and I will be back. Thank you. Greetings, everybody in the main room here. I am your virtual host, Ben Rader. I just wanted to see if anyone wanted to be in this main room, if anybody was having a hard time getting to the breakout sessions. I'm here to help, so let me know if there's things you'd like to discuss. You can definitely do that. I know there's several people here that I didn't see before, so I do see some new faces. If you can find the chat function and you're having a hard time come off of mute, at least I can help you and start addressing some of the questions or concerns you may have, or get you to where you need to be within the technology if you want to join a breakout session. Nakota, for example, Napualani. I'd love to help you out. Let me know if you have questions, comments, start a discussion. Would be great. Otherwise, I'll jump back into the breakout sessions because the conversations are interesting. So. Okay. I think there's about 20 more minutes. Folks will be discussing. Oh, here we go. I got you. Yes, ma'am. Nakota, you're in the main hall. And if you open your participants panel, which for me on my computer, there's on the most right bottom, there's like a speech bubble, which is the chat. There's a person or a silhouette of a person. And if you click that, you should be able to see there's like a main meeting and then there's breakout sessions. And you should be able to, if you find the breakout sessions, then there's 2 links there to join either one of them. Just let me know if you're having problems there, Nakota, or if I can help in any way. Same with you, Napuelani. And anybody else, because there's a couple phone numbers here, which I don't know the names. Okay. And are you on a laptop there, Nakota? Well, and I'm happy to take your notes. I mean, if you have questions, comments, I'm happy to, try to address them or get you the information that you would like. You don't necessarily have to join the breakout room, but yeah, exactly. That's why getting to the breakout rooms would probably be more beneficial for you. And if you wanted to, you could share your screen and I could see what you're looking at and then I could get you there. Otherwise, I could try to voice a little bit more about how to do it. And I would just need to know, are you on a phone app or are you on your laptop or computer? Computer, perfectly. Okay, so can you find the participants and the chat buttons in the bottom right there? Well, obviously you found the chat because it's open and we're chatting. And then right next to it should be, yep, Perfect. Okay. So right below where it says 47 participants, it should say main meeting. And then to the right of that is breakout sessions. And right now, I think you're probably clicked on main meeting. But if you go to the breakout sessions there, do you see that? Yeah, right, at least on my screen, right below it where it says participants 47, there's actually two options there, main meeting or breakout sessions. And I can click on the breakout sessions and there you'll see there's two breakout sessions. Huh, very interesting. It says have started, you'll be assigned to a session. Okay, let me see if I can deal with it on my end. Let's see. Okay, I think I can get you somewhere. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna magically transport you. Here you go. Fasten your seatbelt. Would now, Poilani, I can do the same for you if you like. And in fact, I may just do that. Um, and would anybody else like to come here online and I can help you out or we can chat? Okay, I'm gonna take a break from the main room. I'll be back, okay? Greetings, just checking back here in the main breakout room. Anybody figure out the technology and want to discuss any questions or comments? Or like I mentioned before, I'm here to help, so just let me know. Otherwise, I will jump back into the breakout sessions where there's some engaging conversations going on.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the main space. We certainly, in our group, had a fantastic discussion. A lot of good questions and concerns were raised. Also, some really good suggestions that we are taking on board. And so I'm sure in the other group, probably similar kinds of things. I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're at the end of our day. So I want to thank everybody for your participation. Again, this is, as I was just telling my group, you know, this watershed is really blessed with passionate and knowledgeable people, which is going to benefit the project, and it will benefit everyone in the community. So appreciate your involvement. As always, we have multiple ways of staying engaged that are on the screen there, please continue to take advantage of those. We will take our notes from today, and we will think about how we want to use them for the following workshops. Remember, next week is focused on the canal and the lower watershed, and then we're kind of open for the fourth workshop. So if there's anything that you would like to talk about specifically in that fourth workshop, by all means, let us know. We're still formulating those ideas now. So, all right. Someone has grabbed. I don't know if that's me doing that or someone else is controlling the slides, but either way, that's fine. So again, thanks everyone. Have a great weekend. Mahalo. And I'm going to stop recording.